dug so deep with them. The trust is way up here. So, dude, that's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Now, I can go down my process too, if you'd like of what I think of.
Yeah.
Cool. So so basically, I'll give you the outline. So, I have my intro. I find out what they're looking for. I give a frame and contextualize the next questions by letting them know, hey, I work with different carriers. We do need to go through some medical questions. They all have differences, right? I go through the medical questions, financial inventory, and then really what a lot of agents are missing is this back end stuff, right? Usually when we first start out, and you can still close people like this, but usually we get medical, financial inventory, we have their age and everything, and then we show them a quote, right? Without really getting any other information. But for me, I want to know, hey, what all do you have in place now if you did pass that could help your family? Okay. Now, who would be the person responsible for having to take care of that? Okay. And then after I know what they have, I want to know, okay, what is their problem here, right? Like, what's the significance behind them getting coverage? Why is what their current situation looks like? Why is that not enough, right? And that's going to start building a gap in their mind, right? It's going to build more internal pressure for them to buy a product, because a lot of people, they fill out these requests and they just know they kind of need life insurance, some people, but they haven't actually thought about what would happen if they pass or why they feel like what they have isn't enough. So really painting that picture for them. Okay, now once I know what they have, what the problem is, what the significance is, okay, well, you have this problem. What's preventing you in the past from getting something though? Right? Like what's changed? Why important now? And this section here is really where you can pre-handle a lot of objections, because it's, you get those people that are 65, they've never looked before. Why is it so important now? What's been holding them back, right? And you can pre-handle a lot of either fear, reframing their mind away from pricing to the actual value the coverage has to offer. So then once I get that, some people do need some education, right? You'll get those people who are like, hey, I saw an ad for $300,000 in coverage for $20, right? So this is where you can educate them. Hey, there are 4 types of policies, and you go down each one and explain, hey, that's why this one's cheaper, this one's permanent, so forth, right? Then I get like their ideal scenario of coverage, right? I'm not just guessing at the end, like, hey, they need this coverage amount. I'm just going to guess. Hey, they need to cover burial. They're looking to leave behind a little bit extra. Do they know what a burial costs? I'm going to educate them. Hey, a burial is typically $15,000 to $20,000, right? Are you going to be cremated, or you think you're going to be buried? Okay, perfect. So we can allocate that amount of coverage to this. What do you feel like your daughter would need this money for? Just so I can see what kind of coverage amount would be appropriate, right? So now I have an ideal scenario, whether it's realistic or not. If it's unrealistic, I'll know that I need to set some frames up to make sure to break their frame of that. And from there, I want to bring the emotion back into it, right? I want to future pace out the call. Like, hey, if we did get you this policy that covers your burial, your wife doesn't have to end up moving, like her having that there, how do you see that helping her the most? Right? So they're bringing back some emotion into it. And then you can do a pullback. Like, hey, let's just say you didn't do anything about this. Like, what would that look like for her? Right? So now I have pretty much everything I need. The client understands the importance. I know what they're looking for. I know what they're healthy enough to get. I know their income. I should know exactly, to some degree, what to show them for quotes. And I know it's going to work for them. Right? And where agents kind of mess up at the end is they start sounding kind of unsure of themselves. Rather, you have to be very assumptive at the very end of the call. Like, hey, like, you know how you said this, this, and this, like based off that, what we would do would work for you. I'm going to show you 3 options. Okay. I'm going to explain the product, the carrier, and then tell them the options. And I'll say, hey, like out of those 3, which one do you feel like you're leaning towards most? Okay. But how come that one though? Just so I understand. Okay, perfect. And then I go right into the application. So that's very high level. But there's different outcomes I'm looking for each stage, and every part of my sales process builds off of each other, right? If you don't know what they're looking for, you can't really tie their current situation to that. You don't really know their problem if you don't know their current situation. And then that finding out what's prevented them in the past is going to start building that urgency for them now that they know their problem. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. Please drop it. Drop a J in the chat below. Show Justin some love and appreciation for digging deep into that. It seems like, I mean, it's a lot of that, like, you know, versus surface scratch. It's like you're getting to know them, right? We're not just on a first date. It's like you're on a third date, right? Do I want to go up? Because the second date might still be kind of fun, but third date, you're like, we're going to either see each other much more or we're never going to see each other again. This person's crazy. Like, you're doing like third date questions, like. But like from an understanding standpoint, it's all clarifying. Like when you give them the quotes, you go, 5, 10, 15. All right, 10 grand, perfect. That one looks like made sense to me too. No, you don't do that. You go, now tell me why the 10,000 is best for you. Why that one? I mean, I love that. You're asking every chance you get to get them to talk, right? In a lot of big sales, the first person to speak loses, right? That's kind of some antiquated sales jargon. But in the same standpoint, the person who talks the most often loses, because if they're talking, the more they're sharing with you, the more comfortable they are with you. John Pineda was on recently, and he talked about the farther back in the past you can get your client to tell you a story is the higher level of trust at which they will give you. The deeper of emotion at which the story is the more your client trusts you. And you can't do that unless doing what Justin has just taught us all, is digging and digging and digging to get them to feel comfortable, right? Otherwise, anyone can give them a quote, right? But do they trust him at the end of this call? Certainly. Do they move forward? I'm sure many do. But at the same standpoint, are they going to let some other, pond scum, surface swimming nonsense agent come in and go, hey, I'm Justin's manager. I'm just following up, make sure you did a good job. Oh, he put you in Mutual of Omaha? I never heard that. Some other agent going to come behind you and replace it. No, you dug so deep with the trust is way up here. So, dude, that's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
what else?
The nuance I would say to that is that's like knowing your process, what you're looking the outcomes for is like that first step, right? If you can start implementing some of that at a surface level, it's going to separate you from most agents. Now, where you get to the next level, and it's a lot of what I'm learning now, is like NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming, right? Like contextualizing a question so that way doesn't feel invasive to them, right? Because if you come out swinging like, hey, like, why do you feel like what you have now is not enough? Or like, why is this important to you? You might get some pushback, right? But if you contextualize a question, like, hey, you'd be surprised. Not everybody does need something like this, right? There's like two types of people, right? One person may have like a big portfolio, 401k, some life insurance already. They just want to leave a little bit extra. And then the other may not really have that much. And, they think their family could just kind of like figure it out. So like for you, like if you passed away, like with your financial protection, are you happy with what you have now? Right? And then they're going to tell me yes or no, right? If they say no, you dig deeper. Okay, well, how come though? They're going to give you more info. If they say yes, hey, like, just so I can see the rationale, besides wanting to like get a policy to pay for the burial, what's the main reason at getting a policy rather than just, having them do some kind of fundraising or relying on what you have now? And they're going to sell you as to why they need it, right? Some people get scared to kind of ask that question, but they're on the call for a reason, right? And then you can dig even deeper, like, oh yeah, I'm just that type of person. Oh, okay. I mean, you can give them identity frame, right? Like, hey, your family's really lucky to have someone like you that's just selfless and wanting to take that burden off. We talk to a lot of people, and some people really don't mind leaving that burden behind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're always like, oh yeah, I could never do that. Right. And have you seen something happen before, or like, where does that come from? And they're digging deeper. Right. And so knowing your client too, like every client's different. Sometimes that stuff doesn't work as much on those type A people, and you have to treat it a little bit differently. So once you get to the last layer, which I don't think I'll ever perfect that, right? Like it's always something we can always be learning more. You're just always constantly learning the different types of people, right? But I really want to emphasize, like for newer agents, not to overcomplicate this, right? Learn it incrementally at each stage. And once you perfect the next stage, move on to the next, and you'll slowly start seeing your close rate go up.
Why would you want to get this when you could just do it? What did you say, a fundraiser? Like, did you do a takeaway by offering a group, a GoFundMe? How did you say that? Say that again. That was, what, you don't need this expense, Betty. Just have a GoFundMe.
Yeah, like just so I can see the rationale, Grady, besides wanting to have like a burial covered for your daughter, like what's the main reason I'm even looking at a policy rather than just having her do like a GoFundMe? Right? I'm like, oh, I wouldn't want her to do that. Oh, well, like, have you seen something happen before? Or where does that come from? Yeah, my neighbor had to go do X, Y, and Z, and I just want her to have it there. Okay, so you've always just been the dad that's like taking care of your family, and you just want to do so even when you pass away. Yeah. So now he has the identity that he's selfless. He's the one that takes care of the daughter. So that's like where the NLP comes into play.
That's huge. That's huge. You said something earlier. You're talking about burial expenses and then leaving a little bit extra. That seems like these are some like little micro trainings. Then you also referenced you'll go through and do some education sometimes on the 4 type of policies. I think for a lot of the new agents that we have on here, how does Justin explain to a client on the phone, 17 minutes in, what the 4 types of insurance policies are? How do you word those, just for some a little higher level education for everybody?
So yeah, I mean, it really depends on the client, right? If some client is like guns blazing, like they swear they can get 100,000 for $20, I go into a little bit more depth. But just for like the average person, I'll say, hey, there's really 4 types of policies out there. There's accidental, term, whole life, and index universal, right? Accidental, I don't typically show my clients just because it's only going to pay out in an accident, but it's the cheapest thing you can get, right? Term coverage is the next most affordable. It's the reason being is just because when you pass away, it's going to expire on you, right? And 95% of people outlive that if they're healthy enough, right? And I usually say that I'll subtly diss on a product. Like if I know they can't get term, I'm going to kind of diss on it. So that way I can set up whole life, right? If I know that a term would probably be a good option, I'm not going to really say that. But that's what I'll say to the average person. I'll say, and then whole life is, it's permanent coverage. You don't have to be quite as healthy to get it. Because of that, it is going to be, capped usually at like 40, 50,000, and it's going to be more than the other 2. But most people do go that route just because it's going to be guaranteed coverage for them for the rest of their life, right? What are your thoughts on that? And then they give me kind of their thoughts. And you don't ever want to keep the power with them, like ask them where they think they should go, but you do want to kind of get their feedback and then guide them from there.
Got it. Excellent. So thank you. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Say thank you, Justin, if that was helpful, because that's always good. It's good to say thank you. But what I would love for you is, what do you do to tie it to close? Like, so Bob gets approved. He's like in love with Justin and confident about his decision. He feels like he was heard. He's, but still, right? The birds chirp. Oh, he talked to his son, whose son tells him, you don't need that, dad. Wife comes home. You spent money without consulting me, right? There's always things, but like, how do you elevate yourself as their producer, their broker for life? How do you separate yourself from other managers, other brokers, or other insurance agents calling your lead down the road and saying, oh, what do you do to separate yourself? What's your follow-up, sales made? How do you close the call? And then what's the next day, week, month, et cetera, look like for you?
Yeah. So my ending is pretty basic. I think the biggest thing is like your actual presentation, right? Like they know the need for it now. They know this option will work for them. They know what it's going to cover. They've bought into it. And then at the end, I'll say, hey, like, while this decision here is coming up, if you do me a huge favor, Grady, can you please save my number in your phone? Because I'll be your agent going forward. Okay. Now, really important, once you get that policy pack in the mail, I'm going to have you write my number on the front page. Also write down your beneficiaries on the front page of the packet too. So if they find it, they can just automatically see that they need it. Okay. Now that policy packet will get to you in about 7 to 10 days. My assistant's going to email you a copy in about 3-4 days or so. What questions do you have so far? They'll give me questions or no, and I'll say, hey, what I do for most of my clients is about 10 days out, I'll do a policy review with you just to make sure if you have any questions, we can go over that. What would be a good day for you? I book a follow-up, and I always do the follow-up. And then after every single call, I'll send them a text with all the details of their policy, coverage amount, policy number, instructions on how to make an online portal with that carrier. And then I send them on their way, and I'll follow up with them later. So pretty basic.
Well, but you do enough volume that you know how important persistency is. And so it's, guys, sometimes you hear a lot of crazy follow-up, like Digna sends a fireproof safe after every sale for $39 off Amazon. Any sale that's over $100 a month, she'll spend $39 and send it to them and tell them, this is for your most important assets. Wiley Hawkins sends flowers to any client that's over $100 a month to anyone. So, there's drips, follow-ups. I hammer on this stuff, and I always ask guys like yourself what you do, because keeping a sale is almost as important as making a sale, right? It's sell 10 grand, lose 3 grand, have to sell 3 grand to get back to zero is no fun. So I'm sure you've got a process which you've established that, guys, it seems like, you could do a ton of back end work to try to solidify the sale, or you can do a ton of just front end work, which Justin does very, very well by digging in and building this heavy, emotional depth, long, legged relationship with this client, that there's a bond at probably the end of these calls where there's some significant amount of trust, because there's been stories shared, there's been, heart emotional conversations. And then when you get to that point, right, now they're solid. Like do you know offhand what your persistency is, average amongst your blended carriers?
It's around 90%, around 90.
90%, right? Like, come on. Like, dude, industry average is 70. Like, that means there's people that have under 70. I think FFL average is 72. That's on term and whole life. Now, our IUL stuff is 90, 92%. But you don't sell a ton of IULs right now. Or kind of some, not a ton.
It's not primarily, but yeah.
Blended 90 is 90, guys. So bottom line, if this stuff works, dig in with your clients. Ask them next level, ask them third date questions, find out. I just made that up. You can take it, but get in with them so that you can really get levels. But that's all. I don't want to say that's just your secret to success, but that is what I'm feeling is the big essence. Because I remember when virtual first started, Justin, and people would be like, they'd be in my office and they'd be like, oh, I just made a $275 sale in 36 minutes. And it was a girl, obviously. That wasn't a guy that I just did. And I was like, cool. What's your follow-up process? She's like, oh, I just text them my phone number and say, call me if you have any questions. I'm like, oh my God, like there's going to be a reckoning of falling off, because if you can't, you potentially could build a relationship in 36 minutes, but they weren't at that time. We didn't know what we were doing 3-4 years ago when virtual started. But to see how you've evolved it and the depth at which you take and your follow-up process, I mean, guys, this is why you join these calls. Copy, profit, repeat. So any final advice you have for us? Any final insight? Any other things you do within this? Any other books or training courses, audios, YouTube channels you watch? They can learn additional sales stuff that you go to when you're kind of on a down day and you're like, I need to pick me up. What do you go look at?
Yeah, so I'll give you one last thing that I think is really important, and I can give you some like resources that I really like. But like, I think for this business, your mindset is one of the most important things. It's super cliche, but like, I do everything I can in the morning to get my mind right. Like, because I know I have to be on my game if I need to interject in a certain spot, if I need to listen to what the client's saying. So, working out in the morning and getting your mind right. Now, the one thing, and I talked about this at convention, is I'll do a training where I have my agents literally close their eyes and I'll walk them through their own death and what it would look like for their families, right? Like, what would their family actually have to do in that situation, and how nice it would be for them to actually have something, right? And it's crazy how many people we sell these policies, but some of us don't even have policies that are life insurance agents, and they've never thought about it for themselves. So really getting in your mind that, hey, maybe the client doesn't realize that. How can you be curious and concerned enough to get them to see that? And that will change your tone, it'll change how you speak to the client. You're not going to have as much sales breath. Actually caring makes a huge difference. And so you have to do that by getting your mind right. And, I do a bunch of different tricks to because we all have our bad days, but getting back into it and getting into a positive mindset and helpful mindset is huge. Now, sales resources, I watched a lot of FFL podcasts, Grady's podcasts. I read books like Never Split the Difference, books on NLP. I buy trainings. Again, I'll invest in myself, right? I'll put in $6,000 to $10,000 for training all day if I know it's going to show me return, right? Like I said, incremental steps. If I just bought a training recently, and I've used 3 things from that training that have got me more sales, right? So I'm going to incrementally start increasing that skill set by investing in myself. But if there's anything else that you want me to go over,
That was great, bro. That was awesome. I appreciate your insight, your commitment to yourself, your commitment to your family, and I'm excited to see you build a business. You're heading for vice president, 500 million. Come on, bro. Let's get after it. You're too good at this to not have a huge agency, and just it's awesome to see you, to spend some time with you, and I'm cheering you on. Let's go, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Grady. Appreciate it. Absolutely.
Got it, man. Awesome. Everybody throw one more time. Give me some JAs in the chat below. Show them some love. Light it up. And Justin, go crush it, bro. Appreciate the heck out of you.